All right. All right. I can see people starting to log in here. Welcome everybody. Hey William, how you doing? We'll wait until 7 o'clock to go live here. Let the room populate a little bit. Jeff Jensen is standing by in his palatial estate up in Ketchum, Idaho. We've been talking to him for about the last 20 minutes. I think we're going to have a good one tonight. When you get into the stream, make sure you follow the directions so that you have to give either Facebook or YouTube permission to access your profile so that I recognize who you are when you comment. You can comment, by the way, from either the YouTube page or the Facebook page. And if you give, well, you're welcome. If you give permission, then I see who is doing the comment. If not, it just says anonymous user. So I can't give you a bad time. I especially want to know if it's Carrie Barton because she's always trying to light me up. So while we're waiting for more people to join us, by the way, Jeff, this is the most number of people that have ever accepted an invitation to go. I think I looked a little while ago and there were 30 some odd people that had accepted the invitation to attend and a lot more that were interested. So you're a good guest. You're increasing the ratings of the show. All right. Lots of people starting to join us now. Again, when you enter the room, please say hey so I know who's here. A little bit about what's going on here locally. It rained like crazy the last 2 days. It's supposed to continue to rain overnight and tomorrow. Snow in central Idaho. So it went from being in the mid 90s and really, really hot to colder than a well digger's fanny out there pretty doggone quick. Hey, there you are. Hey, Carrie, how you doing? Johan, how you doing? But there's a lesson in that, which is that you hear a lot of people talking about how hot they were in the tour, or fewer people talking about how cold they were. And I'm here to tell you, you can be both hot and cold in the Tour of Idaho. And Jeff, I think, will be able to speak to that in a little bit. And often within just a few hours of each other, sometimes within a few minutes of each other. So you have to be prepared. You can't just assume that it's going to be hot all the time, or it's going to be cold all the time, or the weather's just going to be good all the time. It changes a lot. That's part of the beauty of this. It is a tour of Idaho, and that includes weather conditions. So you can go from blazing heat to 20 minutes, a half an hour later being snow in places along the tour. And anybody who's been watching the weather up here the last few days will see that as a fact. I went outside to there's a whole bunch of people that are like Facebook users that I guess haven't given StreamYard permission to access their profile. So I don't know who you are. I suspect that one of those is that bunch of rascals from up in the Northeast, because it says hello from Vermont. So I think I know who that is. TOI is like a box of chocolates. There you go. All right. So let me do a few announcements. I don't know whether I'm going to have a guest or not next week. I have some people lined up, but we're getting close enough to tour season that one of the things that I want to definitely do, at least before the middle of July, is I want to spend another hour talking about things that you should definitely be paying attention to. So people like lists. So I think I'm going to do a PBR Monday where we do 10 things that you absolutely should do and maybe 10 things that you absolutely should not do. And if I have a guest next week, I think I'm probably going to do that next week anyway, just because I think it would be a good topic. But if I have a guest, it may only occupy 15 or 20 minutes of it, and then we spend the rest of the time with the guest. So that's what's on tap maybe for next week. But for tonight, we have a really special guest. I'm tickled to death because I finally worked through the technical difficulties with this whole thing enough that I felt confident that we could not only get through an hour, but that I could bring a live stream. And the guy that I have tonight is my first guest. It's no accident because I really thought about this a lot. Who's somebody that I can bring into this that I think has a good story to tell and who really represents my ideal of what the Tour of Idaho is all about? So our guest tonight is a guy named Jeff Jensen, and Jeff is number 64. You probably saw that in the invite. He finished the tour successfully for the first time last year as a soloist, but he'd attempted it before with a team of 3 the previous season. I'm going to let him talk all about both of those trips. But here's the reason that I invited Jeff to be my first guest. And it's because my entire life, the thing that I've cared about more than anything else is how much of an adventure did you have when you did something? I'm not that interested when everything goes smooth and easy. Occasionally you cruise to something and it's easier than you thought it was going to be. And the tour can be like that. There have been people who have not had to even as much as lift their front wheel over a single log. They had great temperatures the whole way. The whole thing was sawed. It all went smooth. And those people still earn their jersey number. But to me, the really compelling tales of the tour are when things go wrong, and it's how you deal with them. The odds are things are going to go wrong. You're out there for 10 days. You're going nearly 2,000 miles. And it's not whether or not things go right or wrong. It's if they go wrong, how do you deal with them? What do you do next when something goes bad wrong? And Jeff Jensen has the most compelling story I've ever heard. It's a wonderful story. Carrie Barton and I were talking the other day about a lot of people get attracted to things like the Tour of Idaho because they think it burnishes their image. They're trying to build a brand or something like that. And, we get those people come in occasionally. Generally, they leave angry because they find out that there were easier ways to burnish an image or build a brand. But there are a fair number of people that show up that kind of have that move in them. This is a way for them to sort of up their profile and get their name out there as somebody who's, a wheel in motorcycle world. My thought about that is always been a little bit different. If your goal is to be a legend, then go out and do legend stuff. And you don't do that with any single thing you ever did in your life unless you rescue kids out of a burning building or something spectacular like that. It's a whole series of little decisions that you make all throughout your life that lead you to that kind of a status. And that's how you build your brand. If every time you ride your motorcycle and you're dead tired at the end of the day, but there's one more trail that's there and it's just begging you to ride down. You don't know if it's sawed or not. You don't know where it goes. You don't know how hard it is. If your decision most of the time is, I'm going to ride that, I think I can do it before dark. That's how you build a brand. That's how you build an image. And those are the kind of people that we're looking for in our community. Those are the kind of people that make up the Tour of Idaho. People that are going to go out there and they're going to hang it out a little bit. So Jeff Jensen represents that as good as anybody I know. He's got a great story to tell, and I'm going to bring him in right now. Unmute his mic, and let's see if this works. There he is. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing well, Martin. Thank you for having me on tonight.
First ever guest. Do you have a tasty beverage at your disposal so we can cheers each other? Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
So the other cool thing that Jeff is known for, the Stafford boys have a pretty good story about Jeff. You want to tell it?
Well, this couple years ago is when I first started riding the tour, but I'd heard about the tour for a long time. And so a friend of mine that I went on the first ride with, Jeff Mintz, called me up and says, hey, you want to go do the tour with me and my brother-in-law, Schwa, next summer? And I'm like, well, I was kind of thinking I was going to do it the summer after, which would have been last summer. But I got an invite, and so I jumped in, and we got an early start, and then we didn't finish. We got to day 7, day 8, and we didn't finish. But then I came back, and I was looking, and I'm like, we have a bunch of people that are coming through here. And so my house is about 50 yards away from the course. So I was making up cardboard signs, and I'm looking at beacon trackers, and I figured these guys are going to come get gas and have some lunch and catch them. And I think I chased the Stafford boys down at Johnny G's Sub Shack in town, and they're in there having sandwiches and Coca-Colas. And so we talked a little bit, but then there's a 4-way stop where everybody has to stop just out by my house here. So I was out there with a piece of cardboard going, give it, guys. And so I did that for, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 8 people. I don't know how many I've done, but kind of encouraging.
When I heard that story from those guys, and the first time I heard it was from the Stafford guys, if I'm not mistaken, they actually sent me a text message through their PLB, and they just said, yeah, we rolled through Ketchum, and there was a guy standing on a street corner holding up a cardboard sign. And that was pretty cool. That's a great tour story. So tell us about your first tour 2 years ago. You went as part of a 3-person team, and I got to tell everybody by way of introduction, I snark Ketchum quite a bit in the description that I write on the Tour of Idaho web pages. And a lot of that snark is deserved. I've played music there. I've done science shows there. And a lot of people in Ketchum are a pain in the ass, to be frank. But these guys are not that way. This Ketchum posse, I'm telling you what, these people can all ride dirt bikes like you wouldn't believe. We're talking about pro or nearly pro levels of rider. Mike Boughton came down here the other day and absolutely put the boots to day one. And these guys saw a trail. They go out. They do more trail maintenance than just about anybody. These are real motorcyclists. And I find in these guys, they even kind of agree with me politically in a lot of stuff. So even though Ketchum drove Hemingway to shoot himself in the head, these guys are not part of the problem. They're good dudes. So when this team a couple years ago got assembled that included Jeff, it was kind of an all-star team, and we were looking for big things from these guys. I was really convinced that these guys were going to put the boots to it. But the Tour of Idaho is a weird deal, and riding ability is not the sole determinant of how you're going to fare. So, Jeff, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell your stories, bud.
Well, like I said, we were on a 3-man team, and we'd all ridden together, and we figured we had a pretty good complement. We had couple of us that could wrench on bikes okay, and another guy, he was always good with a joke, and he was good guy to have around. And so we put it together, and we rode together quite a bit before the tour. And so we took off, and day one was a good day for us, and we stopped at Martin's place and hit the flagpole early, and things just kept rolling, and we were having a really good time. I could tell more stories about Mintz throwing up his phone in the air because he had a bulletproof case, and it hit the asphalt parking lot right in front of Martin and shattered into a million pieces. That was pretty funny. But so we went on, and we continued to ride, and on day 7, coming into Lowell, we got hung up in the Fall Creek landslide, and we got behind schedule. And then up by one of the lookout towers, I pushed a stick through one of my radiators, and so we had to stop and JB weld that in, and that we lost a couple hours there fumbling with those 2 items. And so we've come rolling into Selway River Canyon right outside of Lowell about 10:30 at night, and it was pretty dusty, and so we were having to go pretty slow on the road because of the dust reflection on the headlights. And we were already concerned about gas, and one of our riders, he thought we were supposed to go right, and he took off and he gassed it, and we were supposed to go left. And so the other 2 of us were sitting there just waiting, and we're like, well, we're not going to chase him in the dark. It was 10:30 at night, so we figured he'd be back, but he wasn't back for an hour and a half, and he'd rode all the way 18 miles down to the end. So now we had a more serious gas problem. So we had some serious conversations that evening when we did get into the motel about what we were going to do. And so we were going to look for gas in the morning. So we got a late start on day 7, and we did find some gas. We found 5 gallons of lawnmower gas behind the restaurant there, and we were able to buy that, and we were able to get going. But we were already behind the gun, and, we got into Elk City and got some more gas, and et cetera, et cetera. But we were late getting out towards, I think it's Cayuse Junction out there in the Locksaw country. And so we knew we had 40 miles to go, and we didn't have very good headlamps that year. So long story, it got dark, and so we pulled over and just made a fire and hunkered down by our bikes. We brought a water filter, so we went and filled up all of our Camelbacks, and we had some snacks and we had some food. And some of us got indoor bivvies, some of us just hunkered up next to the fire, and we spent the night. And we got up in the morning, and it was day 8, and we still had 40 miles of day 7 to go. But we were pretty confident that if we got on it, just kind of stayed after it, that we could get on it. And we didn't know if we'd make it all the way to Wallace on the end of day 8. That was when the tour was a 9-day tour, but we thought we could get real close. And so we took off and made a good go of it. And we got out there, I don't know, 10, 15 miles from where we had spent the night. And then my buddy Jeff Mintz, he pinged off a rock and bike went over a cliff, and it took him about 3 hours to rope it back up onto the trail. And I was out in front of him, and I'd gone over some switchbacks going downhill that I didn't think we had gas or whether I could get a fully loaded bike back up them. So I was sitting there waiting, and we had no way of communicating. And long story, we pulled into Locksaw about 3 o'clock that afternoon on day 8, and we pulled the pin. Looks like I lost you, Martin.
Yeah, I'm back in here now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, we were having some trouble streaming while we were both up, so I just put you in by myself. So your first tour in 2018 was unsuccessful. That's got to hurt getting that far, because you guys were basically just really, really close to having it done. Had you gotten to Laksha that night, you certainly would have succeeded the next day. That's got to leave a bad taste in your mouth getting that close.
Yes and no. I mean, we didn't know if we were going to finish or not. We were going to give it a good go. We thought we were ready for the adventure. We knew we could ride well enough, and but we were having some problems with computers and things like that, and electrical issues on the bikes. Schwaz's starter quit working, and so he was having to kick it all the time, and just little things like that. And so it just a multitude of things. And I flatted. I didn't listen to Martin's advice. I was using tubeless, and I flatted. And we also had tried to lighten our load, so I didn't have the repair kit. This was after we got separated, and by luck, I happened to find a guy riding down the Lolo motorway and a little Geo Metro 4-wheel drive gig, and he had a plug kit. So I was able to plug my tire and hit it with CO2 and rip on down to Locksaw. But by then, my tire was getting pretty shredded, and it wasn't holding air. And so we had a lot of issues that kind of cropped up that were going to be problems that we would have had more issues on day 8 and 9, but we could have probably overcome it. But the bottom line is that at 3 o'clock, and we hadn't even started on day 8's mileage yet. And so reality was Jeff was kind of beat up after going off of that cliff. He was pretty bruised up. He was still giggling and laughing about it. But it was good to go and get a big burger and have a beer and know that we could relax.
So that your trip was the impetus for some of the most entertaining text messages I've received from teams out in the tour. These guys, that was the first year that I'd started giving people my number in case something went wrong. And I remember laying in bed at 1 or 2 in the morning, and these messages started coming through from these PLBs. And it was from your team. What was the name of your team again?
We were Glitter Gulch.
Glitter Gulch, that's right, because we got a Glitter Gulch 2 this year. And what I remember is I was getting separate messages from each of you guys, because at some point you were all scattered along the trail, and the messages were of the variety, well, where are these other 2 guys? Can you see them? And you guys weren't that far apart, but you were far enough apart that you weren't going to throw a rock at each other or anything like that. But it was kind of funny. normally I'm a little grumpy about being up in the middle of the night, but that was a really entertaining chain of text messages. And to your guys' considerable credit, you sorted through your problems, you got it done. You weren't able to finish, but then you came back the next year. So tell us about your solo trip last year, all the way up until your issues on day 9.
Well, after the 3-man team, I stopped and talked with Martin a little bit and asked him for his perceptions of what we did right and what we did wrong. And I got some good feedback, and he was encouraging me to maybe try it solo. And so I've been fortunate. I've been able to ride in Idaho since 1997. I got invited over here. I used to live in Oregon. And so I got to come over here and ride these trails. And I really fell in love with these trails and the remoteness of the country. But that being said, I always had a pretty standing rule that you don't go out in these trails and ride by yourself. It's pretty unforgiving country in places. And so I had to get my arms around that. And then I had to convince the family that was going to be okay. So it took a while to get that done. And, but they all came to grips with it, and they started supporting me pretty good, as my family's always been very supportive of some of the crazy things I've done. And so put together an attempt for last year. My start date was August 3rd. I thought by August 3rd that there would be 4 or 5 teams through in front of me. The majority of the sawing would be done. I should have good long days. The weather should be conducive to nice trip. So that was my start date, and started off on day 1 down at Malad, got a good early start and went well. I got into Martin's flagpole, I think about 5 o'clock, and had a beer with him. We talked a little bit on Facebook, and then went down to town, checked into the hotel, got showered, took the next day off, went around, got my challenge points for seeing the various vendors that were open on Sunday. And then got an early jump on it on the second day, riding out through Pocatello West, and got down to American Falls and got something to eat and got some good fluids in. And I was fortunate it wasn't a super hot day. It was like 84, about 11 in the morning in American Falls. And I got to jump out of there and got through the desert. Desert always kind of gives you a little trouble out there. It's hard there aren't true trails, so you gotta just kind of go point to point. And I got out to the Gaston Wells water tank there and stopped and got some fluids in me, drank one of my Gatorades, topped up my tank, and got after it. And again, Southern Butte, big Southern Butte, you can see it forever, but it never seems like you're getting very close to it. But no mistakes, got out there, got up to the top. Beautiful up there. Started back in, went to Arco, had dinner at Pickles, a couple beers, good sleep. Got up the next morning, day 3, came back through the Arco area, down through Ketchum here. Got to grab a sandwich with my wife at one of the delis in town and jetted out and got into Kalen's at Smoky Bar about 5 o'clock or so. Had a good day, no mishaps there. Day 4 got a little bit later start. One thing about coming out of Smoky Bar is there is no real road transfer section. So you come out and you're right on single track, and about 25 minutes from her place, there's some pretty high energy switchbacks going uphill, going up towards Snowslide. And I knew those were there. That's our home area. We cleared those trails and ridden them regularly. And I knew it was going to be gnarly on a loaded bike, and it was. And so I got up there and watched the sun come up from the Snowslide summit up there, had some breakfast, and then dropped down into Smiley Creek, got some fuel because last year Sawmill Station was closed, so knew that I would need to go there and get fuel. And so then jetted on over towards the Grand Prize, Big Boulder, Little Boulder, Railroad Ridge, got up across the Thompson Mine area, and that's when it started raining. And so that was on day 4 at about noon. It started raining, and got down through that section last year, Martin had the solo section going down through Cinnabar, which was a little gnarlier than I remembered. It was pretty rugged in there and raining pretty hard by then. Water was running down the trail that hard. And so then continued on down, got through that. Day 5, again, got up, got an early start, but it was raining and cold. Got on over, got to Salmon and got in there at a decent time, about 3:30, and went to the Les Schwab dealer and got my tire changed and went around to the motorcycle dealers there and picked up some 2-stroke oil and did that kind of thing. And then went to the motel and checked in, got a good meal, went to bed. And the next morning, again, early start, leaving out of Salmon, getting up on top, watching the sun come up. And it was showers in. It wasn't just pouring down rain, but it was showers. And from there, you ride on down and you pull into North Fork and dump some gear. And so then you ride back up. And I got breakfast there, and that was a good deal. That's one of the few times that I actually got a regular breakfast, cup of coffee even. And then back up down the Salmon River, and then back up towards the top and over the top there. And then that brings you back into North Fork that evening. And then the next day you go from North Fork up to Lowell. And again, it was marginal weather. Wasn't pouring down rain, but then got on out, let's see. Now it's the section where you go over to Elk City. And it was snowing outside of Elk City on me up there. And though I'd taken some Gore-Tex coats and things like that, I didn't have fleeces and warm weather gear. And I got up on top by the one lookout tower that you have to take pictures. And I was right in the middle of a pretty serious thunder and lightning storm. It was flashing, and then like a second and a half, you'd hear the boom. So I was kind of in it. And then the road kind of runs along, the trail road runs along the top of that ridge. And I wasn't familiar how far it was going to take me there before I could drop down and get off the top. So I stopped for about an hour and hunkered underneath these rock ledges that were right off the side of the trail. And that didn't really warm me up too much. It was just basically I stayed out of the lightning. And once it's kind of calmed down, I got back on the bike and continued on. But that was a section that I would have then continued out towards Windy Bill and Scurvy Lookout. And so I didn't have to do Lundy Ridge and the Rock Garden the next day. But at that point, I was getting pretty cold and hyperthermic, and the bike wasn't running that good. And I'm like, I don't want to get any more farther remote. So I stayed on the solo route that kind of stays on the roads and got back down to Locksaw. And got into Locksaw, and they had a 1-room log cabin that had a wood stove in it. So I got that thing fired up pretty good and went over and took a hot shower and got my clothes dried out, had some food and that. And then the next day you leave out of Locksaw and you start heading for Wallace. And that's day 9.
So what follows, I just wanted to interject here, because what follows is absolutely the most remarkable story I have ever heard. Those of you who know my history know that I spent about a quarter of a century climbing, and a lot of that at a fairly high standard. I was a guide. I climbed all over North America. I had a really good time. I paid my way through college writing books about climbing. So I was reasonably good at it. And I heard of a lot of messed up, knackered up adventures in climbing, people that like, mostly it's snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. But every once in a while you hear about snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. You hear about somebody that just does something and it just blows your mind. And so I wanted to just interject right here to tell you that what's coming up is one of these 1 in a million kind of deals. This hardly ever works out in the person's favor that's behind the 8 ball in something like this. So, Jeff, take it away.
I left one thing out. I got to Lowell late because I thought that the landslide had cleared, and it hadn't. And I got to Lowell late right before they closed the restaurant and motel, but I was short on fuel. And so the gal was in vacuuming in the office at the restaurant. So I got her to give me my key and got into my room. And then I'm sitting there trying to figure out about fuel. And I looked around because that's where we were able to get the fuel the year before, and there wasn't any fuel. But about 10 o'clock, I rode across the bridge over to the campground over there, and there were some guys that were ATV riders, and I pulled up to their campfire, and they set me up with 2 gallons of gas that they had left. And so anyway, don't give up. If you get in trouble on fuel, go ask for help. And the guy was very generous. I wanted to give him 20. He'd only take 10. And then he goes, I got an extra steak here. If you want to stick around, I'll cook it for you. But at that point, a bed sounded better than waiting for a cooked steak. But anyway, so day 9, I take off, and it's finally starting to dry out, and I'm making pretty good time. And you're on some pretty good roads there. I mean, the Lolo motorway is rough, but you can make good time. You can go fast on it. And since I had missed the Windyville section the day before, I had to go up Lundy Ridge in the rock garden. And I had never been, that section of the trail I had not been on the previous year. So I had no information, firsthand knowledge of what to expect out of there, other than Martin telling me that the rock garden was aptly named and Lundy Ridge was a bear. So I got up there, again, an early start, and every morning I really tried to leave before 5 in the morning. And I think that that's really critical, other than out of Smoky Bar, because I left at 6 there, and it's a shorter day, and you're going to be right on some gnarly trail. But I really encourage everybody to get after it early in the morning. But I got an early start, so I'm riding the road, and I'd ridden that section coming down. So you backtrack like 20 miles going back up there that you came in on the night before. So I got up there, and it started sprinkling a little bit right about the time I got to the Rock Garden Lundy Ridge turnoff. But it wasn't torrential, and it was manageable. And so luckily I got through there. I got up on top, and I got turned around in one section. I couldn't find a trail, and I lost maybe 30 minutes there looking for the trail, but I found it. And then continued on down and got it down out of there and down back to Cayuse Junction again. And I think that's where it was. And so at that point I was doing a little bike maintenance. I think I was adjusting my chain or something. And then the sun was actually coming out, and I could take my Gore-Tex off and put it in my pack and continue on. And so now I'm rolling along pretty good on day 9 and making good way. And I haven't made too many mistakes at this point. The bike's running better, and I'm hanging in there. And so it's pretty fast sections in there. You can cover a lot of ground. And then you get to about, I'm going to say 11 o'clock, something like that. You start getting to, I think it's the Divide Trail. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but, and I got on that, and luckily the Idaho Trail Crews had been through there, and they had grubbed the thing out, grassed it back. And so it was in pretty good shape, and you could move. There's a lot of roots in there and just gnarly trail, but you could move along pretty good. And so about 1:15, I got to one of the challenge points that you have to take your picture, as everybody knows. And so it was right above Heart Lake. And right before that, I started kind of thinking, you know, you might actually have this thing under control. You know, you're halfway through day 9 and things are looking pretty good. And that might have been one of my minor errors. I might have got overconfident on that this thing might be within reach, you know, that I don't have too many obstacles. Day 10 is a road rip going up north. And so if I can get through this, I should be good. And so I got out, got my selfie out by Clear Lake or Heart Lake. And there's a trail going right over the edge, right next to the overlook point, 10 feet away. And there was a motorcycle track in it. And I looked at that, and I well, that must be the trail going down there. You're 15 miles from anywhere out there. And I'm like, there can't be 2 trails. And so I dropped down over this, and I got down in there, and it kind of circles around this big cirque Avalanche scrubbed off hillside that goes around there. And you can see the trail out there, 3/4 of a mile going downhill and circling around this big cirque that's there. But I immediately noticed that the trees weren't grubbed back like they were on the trails right above it. And I was kind of questioning myself. I'm like, wonder why Idaho trail crews aren't cleaning these trees out versus these down here. And then started going over some pretty substantial descents. Like one of them was kill the motor and just dog it on down there. And so I'm kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, geez, I hope I don't have to come back up out of here. And anyway, I went another quarter mile, half a mile, and the trail peters out. And so I've had the trail peter out before. So I just shut the bike off and took my helmet off. And as soon as I did that, I heard a pack of wolves howling. They were like 1,000 yards away. And I'm kind of chuckling to myself. I'm a big game hunter. And so I've spent a lot of time out in the woods, and I've been around wolves a lot since they've been reintroduced here in Idaho. And I know they don't really harass people. They stay away. They're kind of obnoxious, but they're not really a threat. And I'm chuckling to myself thinking, yeah, if somebody hadn't had my experience, they might be thinking something different than that. But anyway, I do a circle, and I do a bigger circle, and I do a bigger circle, and I can't find where the trail continues on. And so I look down and I see Heart Lake there, and I look on my GPS and I see there's a trail out of there. And so then I look at my phone and I see I have cell coverage. So I call Martin up, and I'm like, Martin, am I good here? Am I bad? And so he has me hang on a second while he checks my PLB, and he goes, no, you're on the old trail. You got to get yourself back up out of there. And I'm like, well, Martin, I've dropped over some of these things here that I'm not sure I can ride back up out of here. I'm on day 9. I've got over 900 miles on this tire, and I'm pretty knackered. And he's like, well, you got to get yourself out of there. You got your rope kit. Just get yourself out of there. And okay, well, stand by. I'll get back to you. And so I turn the bike back around, and I know where the trail is that I came down. And so I start working up, and I get about a quarter of a mile until I get to some rock step ups. And this is not a well-ridden trail, so it's very covered with bear grass, which I don't know if any of you know how slippery bear grass is, but you can't get grip on it to save your life. And so I go as far as I can, and I'm tipping the bike over, and I'm picking it up and firing it up. And pretty soon my battery's dead. So I kick it over and get it warmed up and charge the battery a little bit. And then I figure out I'm going to need to get the rope kit out. So I get the rope kit out, and that was the first one. And that one was pretty good. I got it stretched out as far as it would go, and I was still about 15 feet away from the tree I needed to get. And so I'm thinking, I'm going to have to unlace it and use a 3-to-1 rather than a 4-to-1. And then I remembered that I had a toe strap in my vest. So I got my toe strap out, and that was just long enough to reach this tree that I could attach it to. And with one person, with your bike laying on the side, and I hooked the retrieval kit to my tugger, and I could tension it, but you're not going to drag it with the handlebars and the pegs and everything. So what you do is you pull as much as you can on it and get it tensioned, and then walk down and pick the bike up, and it kind of leaps forward a foot at a time. And so you just do it one foot at a time until you get the thing up and over. And that was the first one. I got to the second one, similar thing. And at that point I was getting kind of gassed. And so I think Martin might've called me, and how's it going? Well, I'm roping it back up. I'll get back to you. I think I'll be okay. And at that point I decided to grab my Silky saw and hike up the trail and kick the rocks out of the way, and kind of kick some trail tracks in where I could, and cut the trees out of the way. So once I got moving, that I might be able to keep my momentum going. So I hiked up to the top where I dropped in at the viewpoint up there, and then hiked back down. And again, I'm kicking things out of the way and making the trail more manageable on the way down, and cutting the bear grass back with the Silky saw so that I could get some grip on the trail. And so I got to the last one where the big drop was that I had to dead engine over, and it was probably a 30-40 foot drop. And so I was kind of looking around. I knew I wasn't going to be able to go up that. And so I looked around, and I could kind of go off to the side and then zigzag back and forth. And so I did that, and I got to a spot where I just couldn't go anymore. And so what I was able to do is I was able to go up and take take the straps that come with the recovery kit and dig into the dirt around some of these buried boulders, because there was no trees at this point. These are Avalanche scrubs hillsides, and there's no trees or anything to get any grip on. But if you dig the dirt around the top side of the boulders, you can get some straps in there and get it to bite. And so I did that, and I lifted the bike up about 20 feet. And by now I'd stripped the luggage off the bike, and I'd let all the air out of the rear tire down to 2 or 3 pounds, so that I was getting as much grip as I could get. And so by then I kind of was able to get the bike going across the bare grass, downhill slightly, but just keeping the feather in the throttle and just trying to keep it from sliding. And I got over the last granite face and then was able to come back towards the top of this drop off. And it's getting pretty late by now. It's after 7. And so I went down and kind of got my luggage all together and got it in a pile and took a little break, and then was able to get the bike up onto the trail and just kept making some charges at it, and got to one section where you had to go down about 4 or 5 feet into a depression and then just launch it up like a 25, 30 foot, just a bare hillside, just greasy, loose dirt. And so I was able to just do my best to just keep the thing come down into that in second gear, and then just pinned it for all it was worth. And I got about 5 feet from the top, and I was able to just keep getting it and then just gassing it and just trying to ghost the bike and get it up about a foot at a time and do it again and again and again. Finally, I got up over that, and then I was able to ride the last quarter mile all the way up to the top. And so then I went back down, had to hike back down in there about 3/4 of a mile or so, and grabbed my luggage and my vest and all the other gear I'd left down there and got that all together. And long story, it was about 7.5 hours for me to get my bike out of there. It was when I got up, the sun was just setting off to the west. It was 8:45, it was a beautiful sunset, but I still had 70 miles to go. So I called Martin and said, I got the bike out, I'm putting the bike back together here, and I'm gonna give it my best and go like hell. And the support I got from everybody was just amazing. Martin said, well, I've got a friend of mine, I called him up, he's driving out to meet you out there. And so you won't be out there by yourself. And I'm like, well, I'm good. I've got fire starter and I can go down to the lake and get water and do this. I'll be okay. And then on our last phone conversation, he said, well, I've got a 3-man team. I've got the Stafford boys and myself and others. We're all queued up. I think Dwayne Coulter out of Spokane might have been one of them. And so those guys are awesome. And I rode the last 70 miles in, pulled into Wallace at 1 in the morning.
That's an incredible story. What we didn't want to do is we didn't want to disqualify Jeff. So at first, I could see where he was very precisely because of his PLB. You were like 700 vertical feet off the trail. Is that what we came up with?
Yeah, something like it. It was 700-800 feet down into this thing.
And so we talked about it quite a bit. What's the best way out? The first thought was just to try to side hill around into a saddle, and you walked a little bit of that and decided that wasn't going to work. So then you got your bike back up the trail, and I got to tell you, I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought that we were going to be coming in to get you. And so you're holding up that cardboard sign, came back, right? That was a favor that came back to you because the Stafford boys were 2 members. One of them, I think the other one couldn't make it, but one of those guys was going to jump in a truck. It was Dwayne Coulter who was going to jump in a truck. A friend of mine named Dan Hoheim was in his truck. He actually rode out there, but we told him, do not interfere with this guy because we don't want to jack up his tour. If he's in trouble, then, the whole thing's over. We'll help him out. But once you got back up on the trail, we had to call everybody off. We said, do not go anywhere close to this guy because we don't want him to be DQ'd. But yeah, there was an entire posse that was on its way. So Carrie had a question here. Let me pull this up. And I'm going to.
I saw that pop up, and I've thought about this repeatedly. And in hindsight, we were out clearing trails yesterday, and we cleared the day 3 challenge section. We had some pretty gnarly uphills to get up out of there. You 3-man teams are going to be riding down that, getting down to Big Pea Creek from Lick Creek. And so Mike Boughton and I were out there yesterday, and we were able to ride up it. But I'm running a gummy hybrid tire right now, and has good grip, and my bike's fresh. Back then, in day 9, I ran out of water about 1:30, so I was pretty knackered. I started bonking. I used to race triathlon, so I'm pretty familiar with bonking. And finally about 6 o'clock, I'm like, you gotta get some calories in you. So I ate some gels and things like that. Got my calorie count back up. But in retrospect, that downhill section was not any different than like dropping off the top of Snowslide, which we drop off of day in and day out, and we ride back up that as well. And so that's kind of what kept me going. I'm like, well, this isn't anything that is extreme. And there was also, I had a motorcycle track in front of me that I was following. And all I can figure is that guy either had friends there, or he had a fresh tire, or his bike was running better than mine. My bike was, in retrospect, I should have put a top in before I went. My bike was pretty knackered when I got home. I was pretty gassed, but my tire was just, it was really shot. I put a new golden tire on, salmon, but it had 900 and some miles on it to get to that point. And so I've looked back and played that through my mind multiple times, whether I've been able to ride up it. I don't know that I would have recognized the error. I think the one thing is, like, when I was laying out my tracks to get there, by day 9, I was getting tired of, not tired, it's not the right term. I was getting lazy, and I wasn't putting as many checkpoints in on my tracks. And again, I thought, okay, you're 15 miles, there can't be 2 trails out there. And when I did get to the top and I saw where the trail was, I saw what the mistake was. I was distracted by trying to find where the point was, and I was going to take a picture for the challenge point picture, and I went right by the trail. It wasn't much of a trail, and it was the junction was not well. It looked just like a creek runoff coming down through a big grass field, and that, in retrospect, that's when the trail took off to the left, and I flew right through it. And then when I got up and got the picture and saw that motorcycle track going down in there, that reinforced my wrong assumption, that was where the trail was. And so I got myself in some difficulty. And going back, I don't know that I would do, in the same situation, doing the same thing. I don't know what I would do differently if I got myself in that position. I'm seeing somebody's asking me if I would do a solo run again, or is 2-person all the way. Funny you should ask that. I'm solo running on the 22nd of August this year, but I do think that the 2-person team is the way to go for somebody that's not used to Idaho trails, Idaho riding, and just the remoteness of the country. One thing I do is that I slow my trail speed down substantially, and I really take it with the mindset that this is not a race. Nobody's going to remember anybody that doesn't finish, but everybody will remember who finishes. And if you don't finish, it's over. So it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to be really impressed if you are a hot shoe and you went the fastest through that trail section. You take a chance, you ping your bike off of some of this stuff, and you're 3 hours getting to work back up. And that's just the way it is.
Got
somebody asking me if do I get lonely? Do your mind play tricks on you? I didn't really get lonely. I don't listen to music when I'm riding, but I do, like I alluded to before, I do some big game hunting. I'm out in the woods for weeks in the fall every year chasing deer and elk around. So I'm used to that type of thing. I find myself when we're riding moto anyway, you're by yourself. You're not talking to anybody. You're not driving down the road in a car. So you're by yourself anyway. And, I really don't let my mind play tricks on me. Again, I think that comes back to being a triathlete and, Ironman's a 10-hour day. If you're fast, it's 11 and a half if you're in Hawaii. So it's, you got to keep control of your mind.
All right, Jeff, I have a question for you. Your preparation for the tour, both the times, one time an attempt with a 3-person team, last year's a soloist, this year's a soloist. You prepared very thoroughly. You're an athlete, you're a triathlete, you're in excellent condition, but you really spent a lot of time thinking about it too. So the question that I have that I think would be instructive for a lot of the folks that are watching is, based on the fact that this year, this will be your 3rd time out, what adjustments did you make based on what you learned the first time that you took into the second? And then what adjustments that you learned the last time are you going to carry forward this year?
Good question. So the first year, I didn't have very much experience doing the nav and lining out the tracks. And I had done some, but my buddy Schwa, he was the kingpin on setting up our nav. And so he had that nailed. And so when you're going solo, I had to get my arms around that and figure out how to do that. And so I spent a lot of time last year just redoing the tracks and trying to figure out the software programs and then reading through the route books and reading the different tools that you have there. And so by and large, I've written some of the articles that you've asked about setting up my bike and how I do things. And I'm pretty much repeating a lot of that this year. The only thing I'm doing a little bit different this year is that I'm going to go in with a fresher motor. I'm going to put a top end in much closer to it. I'm riding the same bike, so I'm going to be, last year, I had not put fresh fluids or seals in my suspension. Well, this year my suspension's going to the shop to be new seals and suspension fluid in it. But bike prep is pretty much, I think I've got everything pretty dialed in for how it works. I've got a good headlight. I've got a Baja Designs headlight that is so much better than the stock, even with the LED bulbs that you can put in there. It's the big LED Baja Designs light makes a world of difference. And then I have a helmet light that goes on, an LED helmet light that has 2,000 lumens as well. And the only time I used that one was after I got up out of the hole and I knew I was going to have to be riding for 70 miles in the dark. And so at that point on night 9, I did use that headlamp as well as the headlamp, the Baja Designs headlamp. But, just make sure your bike's really working well. I'm not running tubeless anymore. I'm going with the ultra heavy duty. I'm running the slime in there with rim locks. Just make sure your bike's good. Make sure you're used to it, riding it that way. I've got, my bike runs, it's a 250 2-stroke, and it's running the stock Mikuni with a JD Jet kit in it, and I've got it leaned out pretty good. And I got 52 miles to the gallon on the Magruder transfer section last year, which is phenomenal. So, so far this year I've ridden, I've got 1,850 miles so far. So, I'm riding pretty well. We're clearing a lot of trails. We've cleared 300 and some, maybe getting close to 400 trees already this year. So, we're out on the bikes and we're doing that. But I don't know that I would change things drastically from what I did last year, other than, like I said, going in with a fresh motor and just be aware that mistakes can happen.
That's pretty off. It's epic. You can see the comments here that people are as impressed as I was about your story. I got to tell you, man, I didn't think you were going to pull that one out, and no one was more amazed. Maybe you were more amazed. I don't know, but when you got that bike back up on the trail, there were a whole bunch of people that went, "Yes, it's a pretty cool story, dude."
Thank you. You know, you don't have a lot of options. You know, I mean, okay, I could just quit and sit there and wait, but that's not really how I roll. And that's, I mean, as it is, if you keep going, if you keep moving, you can keep trying, you know, you can usually figure things out. People are pretty inventive.
We would have abused you pretty hard too if we'd have found you sitting down there by the lake.
Yeah.
Plus, you'd have had giardia from drinking lake water. That would have been uncomfortable.
I did take a life straw with me. I do have a small filter that I take with me.
How is riding that Stevens Peak side hill? I bet it was better in the dark than it is in daylight. You might not like it as much when you see it this year before the sun goes down.
That's the one that in between there and when you get on the highway?
No, it's almost, you're almost to Moon Pass. You're almost into Wallace. There's one last place where you ride that kind of nasty quad trail. You pop down and cross a road, the Bullion Creek Road. Then you go up and you go around Stevens Peak. There's a little side hill up there that concerns some people, but it was like for you, that would have been midnight. So you didn't see anything probably.
I don't remember it.
That's awesome. All right, let's see. We've got a couple of more questions here. I'm going to put these up.
I don't think so. You know, my tracks, I finished my last ones today. I did days 2 and 6. I'd done the others earlier, and just kind of checking them. I pulled up my tracks from last year and I overplayed them on top of what I had lined out for this year. And, you know, in last year, I didn't know, like going on day 10, you get up in between Wallace and Priest River, and there's a lot of logging roads up there. And if you're looking at the maps, you see that there's roads going every which way. So I spent a lot of time on just really getting that close. In actuality, when you're riding that stuff, the main road that you want to be on is pretty obvious. You know when you're getting off to a spur road or when you're on the main road and you're rolling. So it's, I don't know that I would add any more checkpoints. And you know pretty soon if you're not on track. I did get lost at 10 o'clock that night when I came out in the dark. I came to a road and couldn't find where it is. And that's the main thing. When it's dark out, it's harder to find because you can't see motorcycle tracks if they're going off or if there's a gap in the brush. And so it's harder to find trails if you don't have them pinned down pretty tight. Somebody's asking about the weight. You know, I really don't know. I picked it up. I wear a vest, and my vest is pretty heavy. I've got a lot of tools in there and my Camelback and food, and you have the PLV on there and first aid kit and all the things that you carry with you, a lot of spare parts. So that's fairly heavy. The Mojave that I use, it has 2 MSR bottles of 2-stroke oil in it. It's got the rescue kit, and then it's got a spare tube, and I carry a heavy duty 21-inch tube. And then a few small spare parts with me. I carry a shifter, a clutch, a brake, and carry a couple pieces of chain and some master links and a chain breaker. And other than that, I pretty much the tools I carry with me all the time. I do carry, where I'm not running tubeless, I do carry patch kit now that's a little bit more extensive. But I would guess that Mojave probably weighs in at 18, 20 pounds.
It looks like we got Dan on there. I'm guessing that that's who left this comment. I basically got lost trying to find you in the dark. Dan was the fella that we sent in.
Thank you, man. It's good to hear that somebody was coming looking for me.
Dan is like he's the tour angel, because every year he lives near Lolo. So he's the only guy that we know that lives anywhere close to that big blank area on the map that says "Here be dragons." That is day 8 and 9. So it's like every year for the past few years, somebody's gotten in trouble up there, and poor Dan gets a call from me in the middle of the night, and it always starts with, "Hey, dude, I'm really sorry about this," but he's always really good about it. And last year he goes, "Yep, I'll go jump in the truck," and that was all there was to it. And he did. You guys missed each other, which was fortunate because we didn't want to get you DQ, but we also didn't want to leave you out there. Everybody wants to finish the tour of Idaho, but at some point, it's all fun until somebody gets poked in the eye, right? And we've had people that have had some issues with exposure. We had a guy a few years ago that had some issues with asthma and stuff, who had to spend a very cold night out. And we don't want anybody. We want everybody to come back. And so there are some things that are more important than finishing. But that story still blows me away. All right.
Somebody asked about cold weather gear, and I use the Climb Dakar gear, and I also use the Climb tactical shirt for body armor. But I also wear, usually, unless it's a hot day, day 2, where you're going out into the desert, I'll wear a dry fit t-shirt underneath that stuff, and then I have a Gore-Tex overshell, and that's typically enough gear unless it's just spitting snow at you. And the Climb helmet also has a removable panel that you can snap into the top of that keeps the wind it blocks off the vents, and so it keeps the wind from running across the top of your head. And I do bring a buff. Buff, you can get wet when it's hot, and you can pull it up around your face and around your neck when it's cold. So those are what I typically use. And I don't think I would bring any other cold weather gear unless, if it's that gnarly when I leave, we're going to rethink the thing.
All right. Well, we're coming up on it here. We're just about at an hour. Does anybody have any more questions for Jeff? I mean, this is awesome. You guys get to hear one of the greatest stories of stick-to-itiveness that I've ever heard, not only in the tour of Idaho, but in all of my climbing adventures as well. There are very, very few people who could summon together the wherewithal to do what Jeff did, because what he did was equally as hard mentally as it is physically. Look, unless you've done this, you cannot imagine what you feel like by the time you get to day 9 of the tour of Idaho. Your bike's beat to death. You're beat to death. You're blowing bubbles. He's probably a little hypothermic. Would that be fair to say that you've been really cold?
Oh yeah. It was pretty cold days.
So you're blowing bubbles, and it's really tough to make good decisions in those circumstances. People in mountaineering all the time wonder, how could you have possibly done this silly thing that, led to this terrible accident? It's because when you're really tired and you're really stressed, one of the first things that goes is your ability to maintain good judgment, to properly assess the situation that you're in. So what he did was physically impressive, to say the least, but the mental part of that was just as hard. And I guess the really good lesson in this to me is it ain't over till it's over. You can, and Jeff talked about this in some other contexts too. As long as you can keep going north, you still got a chance to finish. So don't give up. If you got to spend a night out somewhere, that's not a disqualification. Just get going as early as you can the next day and try to maintain your timeline. You, with enough stick to it at this, you can solve most of the problems that you're going to encounter on the tour. Believe me, I hope you don't have a problem as bad as Jeff's, but almost everybody encounters some problem that they hadn't anticipated that's a big problem. And short of blowing up your motor, most of those things you can probably figure out a way around. There have been people that have finished with completely shot electrical systems, wheels that weren't round anymore. Those people deliberated through it. Jeff got through his problem. You can get through your problems too if you just work hard enough. Jeff, you got any closing comments here, partner?
Martin, thanks for putting this thing together.
Dude, thank you for being a part of it. It's people like you that make this thing as cool as it is. So thanks for being my first ever guest, dude.
Hey, I got one other thing. I first heard about the Tour of Idaho from your article you wrote in the Blue Ribbon Coalition magazine
Oh God, you had to hurt me.
back years ago. And I tore those pages out, and I was hoping to have them here to hold them up tonight. They're in my map package over here behind me here, but I've been hanging on to that since that thing came to print. You know, I don't know what year it was, but I've always had it in the back of my mind. That's something that I've been thinking about.
That would have been 2015. That was a long time ago. It was you know, we tried our best with that. It just didn't work, but we got to find something to replace it now, because I think we're going to need something like that more than ever in the years that are to come. You know, things like the Tour of Idaho don't exist because they condensed out of the ether with the Big Bang. They exist because lots of people work hard to make these trails exist. And well, you know this more than anybody, dude, where you live, there's a whole lot of people out there that don't like folks like us riding motorcycles down trails.
There really aren't. And, you know, I can't stress it enough. You know, around here, we're getting them educated enough that they see us with chainsaws on our bikes, and we're getting lots of accolades this year, even from the equestrians. But all it takes is a couple of idiots lighting things up around some old lady that's out walking her dog on the trail a mile from the trailhead, and we're all assholes. And you can't do that. You just got to really be smart. If we want to keep riding, we've got to protect our interests. And, you know, the only way we can do that is if we just are all smart and we're all team players, and don't do something stupid to give somebody an excuse to hate us.
Well, wiser words were never said. Jeff, once again, I can't thank you enough for being on tonight. I love listening to your story every time I hear it. It's a wonderful tale. Thanks for being a part of this thing. And best of luck this year. I'll have extra cold beer waiting for you at the flagpole. And I might have to bring you into Pocatello along a super special route this year. I might have to meet you in Ingham or something and show you my secret way to the flagpole.
I'd look forward to it.
And for you guys that are yelling cheater, it's much harder than the standard route. Take care, brother.
Thank you.
All right. So, first PBR Monday with a guest. I know we had some glitches in the middle. I think it takes up too much bandwidth when we have two people on at the same time, but I think we figured that out. Again, I don't know what I'm going to do next week. I'll come up with something. I think that we may have a really special guest available next week. And if that's the case, that guest will be on for an hour. But if not, it's time for us to talk a little bit more about nuts and bolts about the tour, because those dates are getting close. In closing, I posted a comment a little earlier this week. Our international teams are knackered. They're just out of luck. I don't think we're going to get anybody across the border this year. You know, and it's nobody's fault. I know right now the fashion is to turn this whole COVID thing into a political football, and these people are idiots. These people don't know what they're talking about. There sure is a lot of that going around. And those of you who know me know I have some fairly strong feelings about that, but this is nobody's fault. It just is what it is. And we're all going to have to deal with it. And in the United States right now, to our international friends out there, in a lot of ways, we're not dealing with it very well. So we're going to have to take a step backward. And my estimate, which I would be delighted to be proven wrong about, is that ain't nobody coming into this country this summer. I think we're just not going to be able to get international guests in. So I'm sorry about that. I was really looking forward to meeting all the international teams, but you know what? It ain't going anywhere. 2021 will get here before you know it. And we'll be waiting to see all you all. So anyway, thank you very much for spending another hour with me. It means a lot that we get to talk every Monday night. Tour season's getting close. I'll have some more updates this week. Y'all take care. Thank you very much.